form to do on Sundays, but she remembered it, and of course I remember the Mooses and Carl Mook, or she was a Mook, you know.
Yeah.
Yes.
And of course Charlie, and I remember Art Mook, and I think Art Mook had a sister. I forget. I believe now. I think I might be wrong there, but I know he had a Melinda or something like that, but I've kind of forgotten.
When the REA come into the country back in
Yeah.
48, 49, I wired Art Mook's house.
Oh, okay.
I put the electricity in his house.
You know, I always tell people.
I said Art. I'm talking about. I said Art. I didn't mean Art. It's Carl Mook, young Carly's dad.
Yes.
That lived up north there.
Yes, he was a big fellow.
Yes.
Carl was.
Yes.
He used to come into town every Saturday. That was his life. Him and Carly. They'd come into town and they'd come in the store, and they'd visit quite a little bit. You know, now see, my dad had this relation there. I didn't know how it was related, but the Niemeyer boys used to come in and visit with me, and you know Theodore Hilker, and I didn't know how it was related. Didn't make any difference. And Millie Hilker, I remember Millie used to come in the store and she'd have to walk down the aisle and she never looked one way or the other, wouldn't say boo. And I used to try and get her in a conversation, she wouldn't say anything. And I remember Mrs. Missing, Lizzie Missing. I remember them all pretty well, really.
Sure.
And they were my dad's first cousin.
Oh.
And they back in those days, it used to be every Sunday, they would have a big get together until they had so many kids they couldn't feed them anymore. But it was quite a thing. I remember going to the Rodenbecks and the Mormons and the Mooks and the Heisters and the Hilkers, you know, and but it's all a thing of the past, and the homes are all gone now.
I know.
You know, on
Sad.
Muddy Creek, I mean, there was the Mooses and the Menzies and the Hilkers and the Sagamires and I mean, the Bill Rector up there and Dodson boys, and I mean, it was quite a community that's all gone. It's all gone.
Yep.
And I remember the Hormons. Now, do you remember anything about the Hormone family?
No, I don't.
Well, they had 4 boys, and there was the mother and the father. Now, they lived east of the church, I think a couple miles or so on the north side of the road. I think Bob Heiser owns that land now.
Yeah.
But anyway, they'd come to town every Saturday morning, and they had a Model T. And they used to come down past the road now, used to come back on Mac Anderson's place up there. It'd come down on the west side, they changed it now, but I mean, it'd come down that hill, and they'd come down past, and they'd go past the Christian church. I mean, they'd come down and go down 1 block south, and they'd turn and go down to the Equity store. That was their trading place. But I remember seeing them. The mother would sit in the back, the dad and Frank Horman, now Frank was kind of the kingpin of the family. He was in the service. I remember one other thing too, he come in and showed me one Memorial Day, he was all dressed up in his uniform. He was really proud. He come in and showed me, he was thrilled to pieces. But anyway, there was Frank would drive, and there was 2 boys in the back and the mother. Now Carl Horman, he lived by himself. He was another brother, but he lived by himself. But these come down every Saturday morning, and he'd give them money to get a shave and a haircut, and by noon they'd be back home. But it was quite a sight to see.
Sure.
It was really something. They had a lot of, I think back of those German people, they lived, most of them lived out northeast of town, you know. They come in the store. They were really nice people. They never give you any spend of any kind, honest as the day was long, and they had it tough. I didn't realize how tough it was. They had no money. Wasn't any money back in those days. And you know, people work for 50 cents a day. I tell my kids that, they can't believe it.
I know.
50 cents a day.
Well, my dad did.
I worked at the store, and we worked 6 days a week, 10-hour days, and 16 hours on Saturdays. And I got $7.50 a week. But you know, it was a job. I remember those people that used to work at the mirror office, Evelyn Hill, she got $4 a week. Isn't that something? I can't believe it. But at the time it was a going rate.
This was back in the 30s?
Yes. Yeah, it was really tough.
Yeah.
And the store had now the store made a little money, not a lot of money. They did quite a business, but you know they had a captive audience because people couldn't go anywhere really. And I always remember Margaret Zeebel, she's gone now, but Mrs. Julius Zeebel, and I was waiting on her. I remember, you know, Julius come up, I remember him putting, he butted in and he said, Margaret's, hold back 50 cents for gas, you know. 50 cents for gas. I mean, they never went anywhere during the week. Maybe they went to church and in town and that'd be it. But a lot of them, they either went to, you know, back in those days, even went some in the team and wagon. But a lot of them walked, they saved the horses. It was quite a life. They had, like I say, no money of any kind. I don't know how they paid their taxes.
Do you remember any of the prices of the groceries at the
Yes,
store? Do you remember any of the prices?
Oh, yes.
I
I remember lard used to be £2 for a quarter. Hamburger was £2 for a quarter. Minced ham was £2 for a quarter. We sold the best overall you could get for $1 and a dime. And we had there was a dime profit. That's all there was in the overall. 10 cents. Then we had another overall was sold for 89 cents. It was an 8-ounce saffron. But do you remember the William brothers?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, they were awful nice to me. Very nice. And you know, I had a brother Henry. Do you remember Henry?
No, I don't.
Well, Henry and I was in competition. You know, we used to sell not every Saturday, but a lot of Saturdays we would sell $2,000 worth of merchandise ourselves.
Wow.
And I will say this for Henry and I, we was really a motivating force for him. And I remember Bean used to tell us, you know, he said, I can hire guys, he said, can come down and probably wrap packages better than you and Henry can. And come down and probably open up early, but he said they can't sell anything for me. And but he was really nice to us. And of course Henry opened a store up at Indianola for him. And then he went over to Atwood, and then he had to go to service. But Henry was quite a guy. He had quite a gift of gab. He was quite a person. We was in competition. I used to take his sales, and he'd take mine. We used to have quite a time. Was in, but we didn't sell that much every Saturday. But most every Saturday, over $1,000. But that was a lot of money back in those days.
Yeah.
You know, I don't ever remember seeing a $100 bill back in the 30s. Once in a while, you see a 20. They just didn't have any money. There just wasn't any. And you know, the WPA, they lived on $40 a month. Most of them couldn't make it. They always had a big balance at the store. I don't know how the store could afford to carry them.
Yeah.
They had a tough time. But you know, Cambridge had the same problem.
Yeah.
Another thing I remember about Cambridge, Jake Graniger, he had a cafe up there.
Yeah.
And Ben Burton, now he was my neighbor boy. Harry Burton was Isaac Burton's son. He's the one that, you know, that founded the little town of Holbrook called Burton's Bend. Anyway, Ben is the only one that, his dad had a car, he had access to a car. So, but when nobody had any money, but if we had a dime or something, we'd go up to Cambridge. Jake Craniger made a hamburger, and the meat was stuck out over the bun. Now, you know, all he did, he just stretched it out a little bit, but we as kids, you know, we thought it was getting a bigger deal, and we'd go up there and have a hamburger. Gosh, hamburgers were good.
He was quite a cook.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he was a professional ball player, if I remember right. And he had a couple of daughters. I don't know whatever happened to him.
Well, Margaret stayed around there for several years. She died there. She lived up over the upstairs in the where he had the cafe.
Now he had another daughter named June.
I don't know about her.
And I think there was another girl. And then I think didn't they have a bakery or something?
I don't remember.
I don't remember who had the bakery. I remember the Thorndike Hall.
Yeah.
And I remember when Walt Luther had his store.
Yeah.
And
My niece right now owns that building where Luther's was at.
Okay.
And they call it Husker Field. They've got a great big room down in the basement fixed up, and there's people that comes there, workers that's working on the ethanol plant, stays there. There'll be, I don't know how many that stays in that room, somewhere around 25, 30 stays down there in the basement. And she cooks meals for them, like breakfast, And if they're around, she'll fix dinner. She also will fix supper for them. And she lets them stay there for $10 a night per bed.
That's pretty good.
Plus she gets paid extra for the meal.
Yeah.
And that's what's in that store at the present time.
You know, now, I have some cousins there. I mean, you know, Karen Paisley and Joyce Hilker
Oh, yes.
and Mary Lou. And they would all come down for my 90th birthday.
Yeah.
It was nice, you know. Now, another thing, I had a picture of my grandparents. It was taken in 1945. Now, that's the only picture I know of that I have that's even around. Now, you know, we were talking, and I said, when I got out of school, I went out and worked out at Albuquerque, New Mexico, this summer. I had my sister's husband, he worked for the telephone company, and he got me a job out there. And the first thing I done, I bought a camera. I remember I went into Albuquerque, cost me $12. I bought a camera and I took a lot of pictures. Now, I'm the only one I know of back in 1945 in our family that had a camera. Now, it never dawned on me until we was here and we was talking, and they wanted to know how come we need more pictures. I said, my folks didn't have one, your folks didn't have one. None of the family had a camera that I know of, I mean, at that particular time, and they were thrilled to death to get the picture. I put it in a frame for them. I gave them all a picture, you know. Now that was, my Uncle Bill was on there, William Sagemeyer, and Anna Louise, she was a Schutz, lived up around Eustis. And they had two boys. One boy was in Louise's arms. The other boy, I think was probably in a teen or something. He wasn't very old. He couldn't have been very old, really. Dean couldn't. And my granddad, and of course, this was in 45, and 44. My granddad died in 45, and my grandmother died in 48. Now, my grandmother come out Fort Wayne, Indiana. She had an aunt out there named Custer, and she come out, and she's just a young girl, but her great niece come out for her 90th birthday, and she didn't know anything about the grandparents. Now, it would be her grandmother and my grandmother were sisters, and they kept in touch, you know, but they never saw each other again. But it was quite a night. We had quite a visit.
Yeah. That was really nice.
A lot of, you know, I have a lot of stuff around. I got one boy's interested, the other kids couldn't care less. You know, Flora and Ray, we used to travel around here a lot, and of course, we're in a historic spot because the Oregon Trail went right through our county. And you know, I go through old cemeteries, and she sat there and she'd honk the horn, you know, and she'd lean on the horn, and she used to get on me and said, "What in the world did you see?" I said, "You know, for me, I can't tell you. Either you have it or you don't have it. That's all there is to it."
That's right.
She couldn't care less.
That's right.
But I could spend all day in the cemetery. I go out to Arapahoe, and you know, it's nice for me. That's where I spend my time in the cemetery. And up at St. Matthew, my dad built the church up there at St. Matthew, the old church, 1924.
Well, what was your dad's first name?
August.
August?
Yeah, August William. And you know, he was filled to pieces. And he was a very, very nice person, very mild manner, and he was an artisan, I'll say that for him. But he never did master the English language. It was hard for them. But he got along pretty good. And you know, I didn't know him real well until the latter part of we worked together, and we spent time together, back and forth, and we worked down the eastern part of the state mostly because that's where all the business was, you know. And Brother Henry, he stayed, and Dad and I would commute back and forth. But he had a lot of history over in Germany, and now they sent me they took and made a video of the little town of Hardin, and they sent me 100 and some pictures. Isn't that something?
It is. Yes.
It was quite a little city. It was a little walled-in city at one time, and they had towers on the corners and this and that. And of course, my dad, I remember him telling, if he wasn't born with a little bit of money, there's no way he could ever acquire it. There's no way.
I got a question. In Arapahoe, did you build a church in Arapahoe?
Yes.
Was there other churches that burnt down? Do you remember anything about that?
The old Methodist church?
Well, I heard that there was like 2 or 3 churches that burnt.
Well, there was a Methodist church that burned. I remember when it burned on a Sunday morning. What happened, you used to have an old wood, not a wood, but it was a coal burning furnace.
Yes.
And the fellow went down and made the fire, and I suppose it had a faulty flue or something, but it burnt down on a Sunday morning. And that was in 1933, I think, or 32, and then my dad built the church in 33. Now, he built that church, and he just did it for labor, he told me. But you know, I always, when I think back and remember, you know where I'm going to put it this way, you know where the subway is now?
Yeah.
Well, right across the street used to be a little shack with a little hamburger place. And he'd take us down there and buy us a Coke, sometimes twice a day, and it cost him $0.25 each time. 50 cents a day. I don't know where he got 50 cents. You know, but it was quite a thing. We helped her. Dad was young. My brother was older, and that's all the help he needed. There was 4 of us boys that helped build it. And my dad was quite serious. I remember we'd been up on the roof shingling, and my older brother nailed my brother's shoes to the roof, and he threw his hammer. I remember he threw his hammer down, and it had a lime pit when it was laying the brick, and it went in the lime pit. The guys, my dad had known that. I don't think he would fire us. He couldn't afford to fire us. but he didn't go for the tomfoolery. He didn't go for it. I remember we used to go out in the country and work, and of course we as kids, we want to go to town at night. Well, now if he wanted to work till 7, we had to work till 7. Didn't dare say anything.
Yeah.
That's the way it was back in those days. You had to be to work at 7. It wasn't, you didn't leave home at 7. You had to be on the job at 7. And it was tough for us kids to get around. But I always wanted to go to town at night, and I didn't like it, but you couldn't say anything.
Yeah.
But he couldn't drive. He was very good with wood and stuff, but he wasn't mechanically inclined. But he was a nice person to be around, really. They all liked my dad. He was very honest. I could never get over my dad and mother owed anybody. They couldn't rest till they paid them. And isn't that something?
Yeah.
What was your mother like?
This way?
What was your mother like? Was your mother a nice lady too?
Yes. You know what? She was very ambitious. And, my mother, I always tell everybody, if my dad got up and go to the bathroom at night and come back, his bed was made. She never left the bedroom till her bed was made in the morning. And she washed on Monday, and she ironed on Tuesday, and she cleaned the house on Saturday. Now come hell or high water, nothing ever got in her way. And I remember on her 50th wedding anniversary, I was telling her, I was back and I said, now mother, those girls come home, you leave them alone. Now you don't say nothing to them, just leave them alone. I said, so they get the dishes in the wrong place or whatever, you can do that when they're gone. You know what, they wasn't there half a day she was on them. And it irritated my sister, and I said, oh, forget it, goodness sake, what difference does it make?
Yeah.
But I mean, it irritated me, it didn't bother me any. I'd be back, and mother, and I'd have lunch or something with her, I'd dirty a dish, she'd get up and wash it. Didn't bother me any.
Yeah.
And I remember, I was out there, and I didn't know my mother was this bad. See, just like Flora Marie, I never knew Flora Marie was ill either. She didn't complain. I had no idea that anybody ever felt bad. I was fortunate. I had an insatiable amount of energy, really. I never got tired. I never got tired. And the guys around me used to complain, and I said, what are you complaining about? I'm going to have to be up all night crawling this cement. You just have to help put it in. But I was very fortunate. But I didn't know Mother didn't feel well. But I went out and stayed with her, and I was going to have an egg the next morning, and it was all rotten. So I got looking around, and she was in bad shape. So I got her to go to the nursing home, but I had an awful time getting her. And here I was, the only one out of 6, and I was out there by myself. And I remember, the people in the nursing home at Arapahoe, they told me to get out of here and said, we'll take care of her. But she was screaming and hollering when I left, but they had quite a time with her. But I think she got along pretty good. Of course, she fell and broke her hip, and that was about the end of that.
Yeah, that would be.
But she had a big garden. She had chickens. My dad used to have a fit about the chickens, because he said he could buy eggs cheaper, but that's what she liked to do. She would take and, with the wash water, And every Monday she would take and wash out her hen house with the wash water. She'd mop it out, you know. And it was she's just as neat as she could be.
Boy, she was.
Now, one other thing I remember about Mother, Orville Moore, do you remember his name?
I knew him.
He had a meat market there.
Uh-huh.
She'd send us down with 50 cents to buy steak. Just think, for a family of six,
Wow.
50 cents.
Oh,
There was only 4 really there back in those days, but I mean, there was really 6 of us counting my mother and dad. But Mother would unwrap it, and she looked at it, and if it wasn't what it was supposed to be, because many times they took advantage of a little boy that went down, you know, they'd push off stuff they couldn't sell. And she didn't think what it was, she'd wrap it up in a little note and send us back down and change it. And I remember, you know, years later talking to Orville Moore, he remembered. And I also remember out of the 50 cents, once in a while I would only buy 45 cents worth, and I had a nickel for a candy bar. Now he told my mother this one time, so she asked me, and I had to tell her, and I never will forget that. I mean,
yeah.
I felt bad, but I didn't feel bad very long.
You
But-
thought you deserved it, didn't you?
Yeah, and I remember, you know, at the elevator, Bill Brunswick, I know you don't remember him, but he
No.
was a big fella. And she had chickens, and she sent me down with a little coaster wagon to get a sack of corn. Well, he sent down sweepings out of the driveway. It was just nothing but chaff, you know, and dirt. She looked at it, back down I went. And, you know, now I respected my mother. You know, a lot of them, they didn't like it, but I respected her. She looking out for her family and for herself. And
That's right.
same way when she bought stuff at the store, it was the same way. But like I say, my dad and mother were always awful honest. They paid their bills.
Yeah.
My dad was able to make a living all through the 30s. The best job he ever had that I know of, when they had Wilbur Reinhold was the manager of the lumber yard at Arapahoe, and he was the mayor, and they put in the swimming pool back in the 30s, and he got a job, and I think he got 20 cents an hour for being the supervisor. And that's the best job I know of he ever had. He told me he used to go out in the country, they'd have to walk, and they'd have to work from daylight till dark, and I think they got $1 or something like that, and he said they got a lot of opposition to people, they just didn't have any money. And they didn't even want to pay $1 a day. But it was pretty hard. They were very saving. My mother was very saving. She did a lot of, you know, cooking and ironing and stuff all by herself, and she did a lot of canning and this and that, and they were a regular German family, and they didn't live very frugal all their life. And the best part of their life is when they got up, you know, the older years, they went out to see my sister out in California, and Sister Hertha was really nice to them. And my dad really enjoyed that. He thought that was wonderful. But you know what? Foreman and I had a good life too. We had a wonderful life, really. It wasn't perfect.
I was wondering who this lady is.
This way.
Who is this lady?
Oh, that's my mother.
This is your mother?
Yes, uh-huh. She was
Isn't
sitting
this-
there about where it is now. She came down, that was in, I think around 1970, well, she died in 73. It had to be in the late 60s sometime.
She reminds me of my mother.
Now let me ask you again, what was your maiden name?
Skiles.
Childs?
Skiles.
Oh, now I remember the
S-K-I-L-E-S.
name real well.
Yeah.
I remember there was a Louis Skiles.
Yes, he's my uncle.
Okay, now, I remember my dad and brother did some work, I think, for Louis Skiles over there.
Oh.
And I remember they were driving back and forth. That was after the war.
Yeah, it was Lewis and Merle
Yeah.
Skiles.
And you know, there was another kid, I was trying to think his name, I think it was Glenn McConnell. Does that ring a bell?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
That he married, if I remember right, a Lomax girl.
I think so.
Glenn McConnell,
I mean,
probably.
I remember Everett Lomax, he died, I think he had diphtheria. Does that ring a bell?
I don't know.
Well, there's Everett Lomax. I remember him, but I didn't think he died of diphtheria. Was that
Was Lomax one of them that died?
he?
I was thinking this Glenn McConnell married his wife, if I remember right.
Oh,
But he
I
was a
can't
meat
tell you.
cutter at the store for quite a while.
oh. I guess I didn't know that Everett. There was another Everett McConnell, but
And then I remember,
there's a lot of Everetts around.
oh my gosh, the boy that he moved out of Dessus and he married. Her husband was killed out. Worked for Ward Rice. I can't say his name now. I mean, the feed truck come in. And he was standing there, and the floor broke.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
Uh,
I can't tell you the name, but I remember the incident.
Was it Orvis?
It's what?
Was it Orvis? Orvis?
I think she was an Orvis, but he was from Beaver City. I saw him out at Estes a few times.
It seemed like it might have been Kenneth Orvis.
I think she was an Orvis, and now Florida and Ray's grandparents, they homesteaded out. It'd be out by Lebanon, south of Lebanon, out into there, next to the state line somewhere. And there was a school out there. I had been out there for years, but the last time I was out there, it was still standing in the middle of a field out there somewhere. But Flora and Ray's grandmother, Flora and Ray's mother, taught school there when she was a young girl. And I think the Orvises live out there now. It's quite a country. Her name was Abu.
Abu?
Yeah.
I don't remember that name.
But I remember they're talking about the Orrs, and Mrs. Orr, former grandmother, lived in Wilsonville, and I think she's buried in Wilsonville. Her and her husband both are buried. They worked in an elevator, if I remember. I think maybe Hanley worked in the elevator. As time goes by fast, doesn't it? And I remember, Wes Myers when he was alive.
Yeah.
And
Harry Wilson.
yes, you know what? Mrs. Wilson was a very nice looking lady, and she came over to the store a lot. And I think she had a couple of daughters, if I remember right.
Yes.
And Harry Wilson, and they had, I think, the hotel there.
Do you remember Ticky Wilson? They called her Ticky. Her name was Mary John now.
I remember the Johns. I remember George and John.
Yeah.
And I remember, what was their daughter's name? Was it Elsie?
I don't know.
I don't know
She
that.
married, oh my gosh. No, wait a minute. They had, there was two boys, and they moved to Colorado. I mean,
Let's see, what would...
I think they married, one of them married, I think, the John's girl.
That could be.
I'm trying to say those boys' name. I remember when they used to be in the store and talking about it, and Herb Dunn married Alice Warner, and they bought the farm it was at Hardin, Colorado. He had a ranch out there. I'm trying to say those. Tell me some names around Handley, and then
Oh, let's see.
there was.
There's Martins.
I remember some of the Martin, but that wasn't the. You know what? I know their name. I can't come up with it.
And Lamb. There was Mary Lamb was a barber.
I remember him.
And then
These are two brothers. And you guys, isn't that something? And they married the John's girl. I remember that. When I was back there, was eating at the Brandon Iron at Beaver, and she went over and talked to her, and I remember that. But I remember Rose. She's a nice-looking girl. I got the name on the tip of my tongue, but I can't say it.
Rod Hardin was the one that started the Brandon Iron. Rod Hardin.
Yeah, I remember Rod.
And then Tom Hardin was the administrator at the rest home for quite a while.
And I remember, their mother, and of course Patty is still there.
Yeah.
And, the Hardins were quite friends of Ralph Warner's. Do you remember Ralph Warner? Yeah. Yeah, Ralph Warner, he was really nice to me. He was a nice person. But he had a problem, I know he did. And Grandma was awful nice to me, too. I used to kid for me, she liked me better than you do. You know what? I only saw her, in all the years, only saw her ruffled twice.
Oh.
She was really a nice person. She put up with an awful lot.
Did you know the Litzes?
You too?
Helen Litz. Litz.
The name rings a bell. I remember I remember the Litz, you know, their daughter married Bob Warner.
Yeah.
L-I-T-Z?
Uh-huh.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, she and her husband live there in Arapahoe now, that Bob Warner and Marge. I think her name's
Yeah.
Marjorie.
You know, I remember their dad and mother real well.
Uh-huh.
You know, in 1948, their boy Jim come back from the service. He wanted to buy a car, and we had a 40 Ford, and he wouldn't take no for an answer. And we sold it to him. But I remember his dad had a fit. He tried to talk him out of it. And he had it about 30 days. He went through it. He made a hot rod out of it. But he was a nice boy, Jim was. And if I remember right, there was a Joe Warner and Jim, and I think another one, and I think they had a daughter. I kind of forget who the daughter married now. But there was a lot of people from Holbrook. I mean, they were good customers in Arapahoe. We didn't get too many from Cambridge or Oxford because they were rivals. But you know, there was a lot of people from Holbrook and Edison. But
Yeah.
Cambridge was always a nice town. Very nice town. And the Lochinauers, I remember them
Oh,
up there.
yes.
And you knew Helen Cunningham, I bet.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And Sam.
Yes. He was quite a guy, Sam
Yeah,
was.
wasn't
You
he?
know, Sam used to come over and he always wore white overalls
Yeah.
and a shirt and a red tie. And the store used to always tell me, you know, get new ties. Sam comes in, sell him something. I used to get on me. He'd just get, sometimes he'd get almost livid. But he'd buy a tie to keep me happy.
Yeah.
It had to be red though.
Yeah.
But he was a nice person, really. They had a lot of nice people, really, in Arapahoe was a lot of nice people.
Yeah.
The Lewis brothers, they were nice, you know. And Harold Paul, he was a nice person. And of course, the tavern down there, they done a wonderful business, Hard Frost. My dad built the garage in 1927. I remember that. And I remember the first car that come there. Pete Phelpson got the first automobile. I can still see it sitting in the show window. And the people around it was really something.
What kind of car was it?
A Ford, 1928 Ford.
1928.
You know, it was 60 horsepower, and it had 3-speed transmission, and it goes 60 miles an hour. Now, I have another little story. You all heard about Jim Mather.
Yeah.
Well, Jim and I went through school together, and was good friends, you know, but Jim Mather's dad had a store right north of where William Brothers is now. A little 25-foot front. He did quite a grocery business there. I remember my mother used to buy 10 sacks of flour at a time. She did a lot of baking. But anyway, this happened, this would be back in the early 30s sometime. But this little car sat on the floor for 4 years. It was a 31 Model A Roadster. And he had a fellow out the name of Les Hahn who lived out north of town. He came in and he bought this car for his boy. And the DC heard about it, so he went down and he took it away from him. I think I heard anywhere from $1,000 to $1,600 what he owed him on the grocery bill. But anyway, it sold for $400. But DC took it away from him, and Jim had a car. It was a beautiful little car he went back and forth to school in. Gosh, Jim, you know, I used to kid him. He wore shoes that took a polish. He had shirts, dress shirts, and pants. The rest of us just had, you know, overalls and old work shoes, and he used to deny it. But anyway, he had a $7 grocery, not a grocery bill, but a bill down at Sorensen's drugstore for, you know, malted milks and cokes and stuff. And his dad was going to disown him. but also, he had a $20 gas bill at the store one month too. And his dad was going to, you know, going to take and ground him. Now, they had a family there named Dix, and he run the drugstore. Now, you probably heard of O.A. Dick?
No, I don't remember.
He had a
that.
brother up at Cambridge.
Dan.
And,
Dan Dick.
yes, Dan, he had a boy named Royce, if I remember
Right.
right. But anyway, back in those days, he had a Studebaker, President Studebaker, and it was a fancy car. Now, Jim's dad had I think it was a 78 or 88 Chrysler. And on Saturdays, they would take and time each other, driving back up to Lexington and back. Gosh, if their dads knew that, there's no way they would ever get to drive again. on those gravel roads, and you don't, whether you remember, out north of town, they call it Devil's Gaps.
Yeah.
I mean, they had, when you go a little bit, feel like you're going out in the air. Well, now they got a big kick out of this. They'd go wide open, It's a wonder they didn't wreck them.
Oh, it is.
But I can't get over that 3108 model roadster. Jim let me drive it a couple times. I thought it was wonderful. Now, I had one later years, but mine wasn't new. But Jim, he was really a pretty good boy, really. He went down to Peru, and he was, he got to be quite an athlete. He got to be, he ran the 100, I think his best was 9.6. And of course, the broad jump was his big deal. Just think that held up for over 20 years.
Yeah.
22 foot 10 and a half. Isn't that something?
It is.
And Gail Sayers went out, and he wasn't even going to jump the day he broke the record. They talked him into it, and I think it was just going to be a practice jump. I think he went out 24 feet something, if I remember right. And it was there for years and years and years. That's quite a jump. I remember the Rutan boys, they used to be up around, Lebanon. And I don't remember their first name anymore. And the Childers, I remember them. And they were pretty fast. And at Wilsonville, they had one big fellow at Wilsonville who played football. I can't say his name now. He was a big boy. He's bigger than all the rest of us. I remember, the football field used to be out north. I think next to the schoolhouse or somewhere.
In Wilsonville?
Yes.
I thought it was, would have been west or east of the schoolhouse.
Yeah. And then I remember being, playing there.
Mhm.
Gosh, just think how long ago that's
Oh,
been.
yes.
Time goes by, doesn't it? And I was in the foot of 35. I spent, you know what, I'm the only one left. There was 14 of us. I'm the only one left. I was the youngest. And I remember, I didn't realize the danger or anything, and I slept. The rest of them, they were older, and there's no way they was going to go to sleep. But it didn't bother me any. And of course, I was a good swimmer. I thought, Lordy, I can take care of myself. But,
Where was you at when the 35 flood hit?
well, I was down at the mill.
Oh, you lived, you was down.
I and a fellow named Jack Dyke, we were down just kids, and we walked down there, and they put us to work, pumping. We used to have just had hand pumps back in those days, and we was doing pretty good pumping water out of the basement till about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and then the water come in faster than we could pump it out. But anyway, they sent a couple fellows back to Arapahoe to get us, something to eat, and they're going to tell my folks where they were, and we kept watching for them, and they never come and never come. We saw we could see, where they started, but they never made it. Well, what happened, they got washed off the road, and they were hanging onto a telephone pole. But anyway, we motioned to them, and they tried to come over across on the wires. One of them was named Everett DeBoer and George Hayes. George Hayes, he got about halfway over and he couldn't make it. He went back, but Everett DeBoer, he rolled over the telephone wires till he got down where the bridge was, and we threw a rope up to him, and he slid down the rope, and we saved him. But they found George a day or so later, he was down east in a clump of trees.
Oh, dear.
But, I never saw Everett again. From that, when we come back to land, I never saw him again in my life. Never. I know he's gone, but all the rest of them are gone. Bigley and Paul Peterson, and there's quite a few of them down there, and they're all gone.
Now, do you have any memories of the 47 or the 48-9 blizzard?
I remember not too much. I think Cambridge was hurt worse than anybody else.
Well, from Arapahoe down to Holdridge, they had them narrow cuts in the road, and it drifted shut. And the state just was able to open up a narrow place for one vehicle to get through at a time, and then it blow back shut.
You talking about the snowstorm?
Yeah.
Yes, I remember it. Really, between Holbrook and also in the hills they were level, and over east of Arapahoe, Edison, they were level too.
Yeah.
I remember the Army come out with bulldozers, and a lot of the roads out north of town, they were just level.
Mhm.
And I remember they found some, I think, trucks and cars and stuff embedded in the snow. It was really something, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
I remember, for me, grandmother had a 28 Chevrolet. We bought that from her. And I took the kids, we'd drive up through there, and the snow drifts, they were way above the car. Another thing I remember, I think it was about 24, 25 was quite a big snow too. My dad, we went out to Mormons, and Mormons lived south where the St. Matthew Church used to be. And we went out there on a Sunday, and I remember the snow drifts was so high, you couldn't see out of the Model T. But they had the roads pretty well cleared. You remember anything about the Mormons?
Yes, I knew Al Mormon,
Yes?
and well, see, I can't think of all the names right now, but I knew
It was Al and Walter and Herb.
Herb, yeah, and there's one that lived out north there that had several boys. Oh, I can't think of his name right now. He lived out north of Holbrook there, and they had several boys.
I think, was that Herb?
That must have been Herb, yeah.
Yeah.
Al Mormon's one that had the Chevrolet
He had one
garage.
boy.
Yeah.
And I remember Clara. Now Clara Mormon was my dad's. Her mother was my dad's first cousin.
Oh yeah.
Now she was born, I think, over in Germany. Leslie Missing was. She's just a young girl when she come over. They had a nice big home. And now you probably don't remember that though, but
No.
had a nice big two-story home. Now the reason I remember a lot of this, they had ducks and geese, and they had a cement pond out on the north side of the house. But anyway, in later life, Paul Missing and Eunice lived there,
Yeah.
and they had a girl that drowned in that little pond.
Oh yeah.
That's been a good many years ago.
Yes, it has.
Paul was a nice person. He used to come in and visit a lot in the store. He was.
Well, she was a nice lady too.
Yes. And the last time I saw her, I went out there and she was sitting on the porch, and I stopped, and I was just going to be there an hour. I was there over a half hour. I mean, a half a day. It was very nice to visit with. But, I remember a couple other ladies. You remember Mrs. G.R., the name of Mrs. G.R. King?
No.
I
They
do.
run the mill, G.R. did. But she come in, and she was quite lonesome. And I, as a kid, I didn't know sick 'em. She come in and tell me her troubles and this and that, and I didn't know. And Mrs. George Greening, she was abused at home. I know she was. She was so glad to have somebody to talk to. I always remember she was so nice to me. And she had a boy that lived down over here at Hebron. He's gone now. He used to come over and see me quite a little bit. He told me his dad was a mean person, very mean. Wasn't very nice to his mother. But she was very nice, I remember. And the Blauvelts, they were part of the Grinding family. And Andy J. was another one. He was a nice person.
Yeah.
Very nice. Andy and Lucy and the Larsons. I remember when Art Larson was the manager of the store, the equity store.
I don't remember him.
And Miles Lewis and Martha, and then I remember the Olsons out there, they had a 28 Ford pickup for delivery service. All the stores delivered at one time.
Yeah.
And you couldn't get them to do it anymore.
No.
They charge you now. I remember I had a fellow named Tom Carter. He delivered at the store. He got 35 cents a delivery. But he had to have a full truck, before he'd do it. But it was quite an experience. And the William Brothers, they had quite a store. It was a fantastic store. But,
Did you know, you probably knew Roland Emmett.
Oh, yes. Roland Emmett lived next door. I used to kid him. He was a Krumme kid. Yeah, I remember Si real well.
Yeah.
Last time I saw him at Jim Maxwell's funeral, I was out there, and I spent about an hour just visiting with Si, but and then I did talk to him a couple times after that. I remember he'd tell me the last time I talked to him, they found out he had Hodgkin's disease, but he used to babysit for Si, and he couldn't say his name. He called himself Bum Emmett.
Oh.
But we nicknamed him Si, and that was for some kid. I don't remember where he's from, but he was. I remember he had a. Remember those old painter's caps he used to have? He had it turned up, had Si written on the top of it, but it was a track meet of some kind.
Oh.
But it stuck with Si for years and years.
But that was Roland's nickname?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and he nicknamed my brother. Roland couldn't say dear, so he'd say, how was that now? He couldn't say dear, so he called my brother Darty. And that stuck with him for years too, and my
Yeah.
brother Carl.
Because I used to clean house for Grace. And
For who?
Grace, that's
Oh.
Roland's wife,
You know, I met her, I didn't really know her. I have a nice picture of little Roland and Grace, you know,
Yeah.
taking it back there. And
But Grace has moved to Scotia now,
yes.
and she lives there with her son, or close to her son.
You know, that house where the folks lived, my dad built that about 1923. I remember we lived there just for a year or so, and he sold it to Finch and Twyla.
Uh-huh.
And then they built the one where it was at. Now the Catholic Church used to sit right west of where my folks lived. That's where Pat Zebel lives now. You know where that is? You know where Roland used to live? On the corner?
Yeah, I think so.
It's just southwest on the other corner.
Okay,
And the church sat on the west, where Ambrose Myers lives.
okay. We know Ambrose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember Ambrose real well and his wife. You
Yeah.
know.
Ethel.
Now, Ambrose's wife, I think she was a raider. And my
Yes.
cousin Merle, and she just died just
Yes.
recently. And,
Verna.
yeah, I remember the Raiders.
Mhm.
You know, though, you know, Henry and I knew most everybody around there back in those days.
Uh-huh.
And you know, they used to just come in. We were just kids. They'd just come in and they'd pick on us, and we had to be nice to them.
Yeah.
Had some people who were nasty. I don't want to say their name, but they had some people around there. They were nasty, and they couldn't say anything nice about William Brothers. William Brothers were nice. They tried to be nice to people, and they went clear out of the way to be nice to people. They were nice people,
Yeah.
really.
Did
And
you
Marie
know
Williams,
Hilda?
she was something. She was a nice person.
Who was that?
Marie Williams. You remember her?
No, I don't.
She was a
but
brat. You remember Warren Brad?
I don't, because I was over by Wilsonville, so but I was born in 35.
Yeah. Gosh, well, you're still a young'un.
I'm a baby.
Yeah. Gosh, I was born in 17. Isn't that something?
Uh-huh.
You don't realize when I come down here, this family's down here, the Helveys, and some of the old timers, they were still around, but I didn't know anything about, those. I just read a little bit. I remember when Farm Ray's mother was here, we took her out here to Rock Creek Station. There was nothing there. It was hard to get in. They had a little sign up where the station said and where the well was, and we had quite a time getting down in there, and had quite a time getting back out of there. Now it's a fabulous place. It's fabulous. You know, we had some people out here. Do you remember? You probably don't remember when Clara Callan was a representative, and he was going to make this a wilderness out here. He wanted the government to buy this land, going to set it aside. Anyway, there's a fellow named Alfred Whelan out here, and we had the lumberyard down here. And he came in one day, and he just waving his arms and shouting, and I don't know what he was talking about, but I finally got him calmed down. He said I was for the government to buy all this land, and he'd be kicked off his lands, But I did say this, I said the state would probably buy this land someday, and they'd pave a road down, and they did, and they bought it, but I wasn't smart enough to know they was going to make a big tourist attraction out of it, like they did, and put a nice visitor center up there. It's a nice place. Have you folks ever seen it?
Here?
The Rock Creek Station out here?
No.
No. That's the first time I've been here.
That's what Wild Bill Hickok had his big fight out there.
Oh, I've read about it.
Yeah. No, that's a big farce, but it sold a lot of books. I mean, Wild Bill was kind of make a long story short, there was a girl involved. I mean, Dave McCandless had a mistress come out from, I think, South Carolina. They had two stations, the West Station and the East Station. She stayed in the West Station, and I think Bill Hickok was, kind of good friends with her, this and that. And there was bad blood between them. And Hickok shot him, and he was acquitted. He was never really in cold blood, really. And there's still a lot of descendants around here from those people. But the Helveys out here, most of them are all gone. They settled out. There was a lot of Helveys out here on the west part of of the county out here. But most of them are all gone now. There's a few, just, you know, distant relation left. And the town, some of the land's been over, you know, for almost, it's over 100 years. There isn't much to the land anymore, really, but there's a little station set there. Tom Helvey had a little station, and Joel Helvey had a little station, but it's all gone. And just think, they'd have 500 wagons out here by the camp, by the little Sandy out here, on a Sunday. The women would, you know, do a little cooking.
Yeah.
And get the kids cleaned up, and all take baths and this and that. Now the women, all those who were well had to walk, and just only the infirm and the old age rode. But they weren't very old. Most of them were, you know, were 30 and under. They just couldn't hack it. There's no way. But it was a tough life.
Yeah,
Yes.
sure.
Just think, they come through here all through the summer, and isn't that something?
Because now lots of people live to be 100.
This way.
Nowadays, lots of people live to be 100,
Yeah,
you
I tell
know.
everybody I'm not going to die. I'm going to be older than Methuselah.
Yeah, I bet you will.
You know what? I'm very lucky though, really. I've had some sickness over my life. I've had, you know, heart surgery, and I've had a few other things and this and that, but I've been very fortunate.
Yeah.
Really, I can't complain. I've had a good life. You know, I got to do a lot of things, and for me, had a good life too. In spite, she had emphysema,
Oh,
and she fought it for 20 years, but she never complained, really. But I didn't know. Now, I know more about Flora Mae's illness now than I did when she was alive. But she was a heavy smoker. She smoked from the time she was just a teenager. We used to talk about it, and I used to tell her, you owe it to me, you know, to quit. And she tried. She said, I can't. She couldn't go through it. Isn't that something? Yeah. You know, not too long ago, they had quite an article in Newsweek about addiction, and it's terrible.
yeah.
Said people, they'll do anything to take and satisfy their habit. But she just couldn't do it. She tried, and she just couldn't do it. You know, that's the same with an alcoholic.
Yep.
You know, and I'm just speaking what little I know was in my family too. But I think, you know, Ralph Warner, and I know Ralph told me, you know, there were times when he didn't want to do it, but he just couldn't. He couldn't resist the temptation. He just said, you know, he couldn't explain it to me, but he said it just gets pressure on your mind. You just can't. You got to give in or else,
Yeah.
and that's a bad thing. But drugs is a lot worse.
Yes.
It's a bad, and I'm sure there's drugs out in Furnace County.
Oh, all over.
Yeah, there are here too.
Yeah, it's bad.
Really
They just had a big drug bust right there in Arapahoe just like a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, it's a bad thing. You know, but when you stop to think, you know, it was nice out there. You know, the little town of Henley was quite a town this day. I remember they had when the hotel was still there, they had dances over there, and the Harmons lived over there, and the Wilson boys, and remember Swede Wilson.
Do you remember when that kid that invented the Kool-Aid there at Henley?
Yes.
And Hastings thinks that he done it down there. He didn't. He done it in Henley.
You know, Flora Mae has a piano downstairs, belonged to Kitty Shoemaker.
Oh.
Now, I remember the history, how she got it, but anyway, I remember moving her down there. God, it's heavy. And, you know, I was young in those days, and my guys complaining, and I down on the bottom, and they handled the top. And my kids is down there now, and I said, I'll never take it out. There's no way I'll ever do it. But it belonged to her in the olden days. And then, of course, I remember Ralph, you know, he remembered, you know, Doc
Yeah.
Shoemaker and all the Shoemakers.
Oh, yeah.
There's quite a family over there in their day. Now,
Well,
also, I remember, you know, Harry Burton, he used to be a Watkins man. And I remember he had I remember far back, he had a little cart that had a horse on it. And he'd go out in the country. But anyway, I remember when he sold Perkins products. And that was when he moved down, Edwin moved down to Hastings. And Perkins products, isn't that something?
Yep.
Yeah.
But Harry made a living.
So he sold Kool-Aid then?
This way,
Did he sell Kool-Aid?
I think he had something, I kind of forgot now, but I think it was in a glass jar or something. But then they, you know, they sold it to General Foods. I remember he got millions of dollars.
Yeah.
I remember he used to